Hey, this is Brad from Heaven's Metal Magazine. Here's a conversation I recently had with Dan McCabe from the pioneering Toronto based rock band Daniel Band. Yeah, this Rush poster is not accidental hanging up here. We'll discuss many things, all Toronto, Rush, Triumph, but more than anything, Daniel Band. Dan McCabe is a great guy. We had a wonderful time talking, and an hour went by just way too fast. It felt like we were just getting into the conversation when it was time to shut the whole thing down. One thing I do want to say is I had to record this using um, Google Groups or Google Messenger or whatever instead of Zoom. So every time I talk, my big fat head comes on full screen and I can't shrink it down and put it in the corner like I usually do. So please forgive. Enjoy this conversation with Dan McCabe. I know I did, and I'm actually looking very forward to all things Daniel Band coming up.
Okay, we're starting. You look so respectable in your sweater and your glasses.
Well, I'm doing the executive pastor role today, so that's what I do during the day. You see.
Okay, so let's jump in. We'll start where you are now, and then we're going to go back to late 70s. How does
Sure.
that sound?
Sounds good to me.
So what do you do? What is your real gig?
Okay, so I let me go back a little bit further than present. So for 40 years, I was involved in the pest control business. So I was doing all that kind of stuff while Daniel Band was going on because Daniel Band was never full time. So I was doing pest control. So in those 40 years, I kind of rose up through the ranks and became, vice president of a couple of companies. And so I had a lot of business background in that. And I retired from that just about 3 years ago, I guess now, and took on the role as the executive pastor / worship pastor at the church. So that's where I presently am today.
Fantastic. My oldest son is a worship pastor at a church in Georgetown, Kentucky. So
Oh, very good. Yeah.
he was
So all of
not.
this past experience has kind of, been able allowed me to do both jobs, like being the executive pastor role, which, brings a lot of my business experience from the past back in, and then plus music ministry has always been there. So, worship pastor thing's a natural fit. So it's a real strange combination to have an executive pastor and a worship pastor as one person because they're very different personalities.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want my son to be in charge of finances of his church.
Yeah. I think I'm a rare bird.
Okay, so we got present out of the way. We'll return to present about what's going on with Daniel Band and all of that. But I am very interested, and you'll see, and if you've watched any of the other interviews I've done for Heaven's Metal, I always enjoy going back to the beginning and getting the genesis of the band and what you were doing in the late 70s and how your musical influences, what the music scene was like. I think I put that in my email. It must have been crazy in Toronto in the late 70s. So if you could take us back there and just tell your story.
Yeah. So let's go way back. I was raised in a really solid Christian home, and the interesting thing was that the church I went to was a very, very, very strict. It would be Brethren background. So they didn't have any pastors. They had, it was run by a board of elders, and they didn't have any music like we know it today. So there's no pianos or organs in the church. So it's just all a cappella singing. So you can see it's quite a departure from where I ended up. So I stayed at that church with my parents and until I was, I guess, about 18 years old. And they said, okay, you're set free. You can go wherever you want, right? So I landed at Bendale Bible Chapel, which is the home of the One Way In Coffee House. And, I've been going there and hanging out and everything else. So in that process, like when I was about maybe 16, I guess even earlier than that, like 14, 16 years old, I was starting a lot of bands, just a lot of secular bands playing secular music. So, I was playing stuff like, Kiss and Rush, and, because I didn't even know that Christian music existed, because I was never exposed to it. And it wasn't until a friend of mine played me a Larry Norman album. And I went, wow, you can do that and be a Christian, And so you can see where it came from. And I realized, okay, God, you've got something for me to do. So now I can see it, that you've sort of said, okay, here's something that would be something you can do. And so immediately I thought, okay, I'm going to serve you with the gifts and the talents that I have. And then started to put some, started to do some Christian music. So I was at this one way in coffee house where bands would come every Friday night and play. And so my brother and I had a band called Manna, and I played bass in that, and he played guitar. Great guitar player. By the way, he played some of the guitar, pretty much all the lead stuff in the Dreamer albums. And my brother and I wrote most of those songs in the Dreamer albums, a lot of them, anyways. So, anyways, we had this 3-man band called Manna, and I'd go to the coffee house and I saw this band playing there called Harvest, and they were a local band in Toronto. And they were amazing. They just were an incredible band. They had a little bit of a funk sound to them, but also like the Eagles, a little bit of that kind of sound to them as well. And I was watching this guitar player. His name was Tony Rossi, and he was just shredding it. I'm going, this is absolutely incredible. I didn't even know that this stuff existed. And so to me, my dream in life was to be able to play or open up for Harvest as Manna in this little church basement to about 100 125 people, maybe at tops, right? That if I just felt myself that if I could do that, that would be like a huge dream of mine, you know. And so we got to open up for Harvest, and I was as happy as could be. I go, this is amazing, God, thank you so much, you're just doing some amazing things. Little did I know that he had many other things down the road planned, so that's where I met Tony Rossi. And now Bill Finley, who was with Daniel Band as well, he actually was one of the guys that was on the committee that ran the coffee house. So that's sort of how we all interconnected. So one day Harvest was looking for a keyboard player, and keyboards was actually my first instrument. I only played bass because no one wanted to. So so I thought I better learn how to play bass. So I played keyboard. So I ended up in Harvest with Tony Rossi playing keys, and he was on the guitar. And so now Tony and I are playing together in the same band in Harvest. And then Harvest started to wind down. And so Tony and I kind of looked at each other going, well, why don't we, you and I just do some things together. So we took a lot of concerts that Harvest had canceled. So we covered them. And that's when I switched over to bass. And then Tony and I were together. He was playing acoustic and I was playing bass. And then we brought Bill Finley in on acoustic as well. So it was really kind of an unplugged kind of thing originally. People used to joke, they called this Little Harvest. That was how so that's how the first sort of the beginning stages of how Daniel Band started to come about, and where I met Tony Rossi and Bill Finley.
So that was the beginning. The Little Harvest was the beginning of Daniel Band, but
Yeah.
you were acoustic. You had been playing hard rock before Little Harvest, correct?
Oh yeah, that was like all secular music, right? And Harvest too. I wouldn't say Harvest was hard rock. They were more easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said Eagles, so
Eagle style kind of thing, yeah. So they wouldn't be hard rock. But I really came from a background where I understood hard rock, and how to play it and what it, how you put it together. So that's when Tony and I started getting together again. We started doing this thing, and people joked around. We didn't have a name. We didn't really take ourselves very seriously. But at one point, Tony said, "Well, maybe we should actually think about this a little more seriously." And so we took some time off, and then just wrote a bunch of stuff that you hear on the first On Rock album. And we came out and shocked everybody because this was something entirely different than what they had seen us do before.
Well, and that was 82, right? When On Rock hit. You recorded that much earlier than 82, though. Am I right?
Yeah, well, Daniel Band would have officially probably started around 79.
Okay.
That's when we first started playing, and getting some exposure like that. But it really, and I say this every time I talk to somebody, it wasn't like a group of guys that got together and said, okay, guys, let's start a band. It just, one thing just morphed into another as God just opened different doors.
So it's very organic.
Yeah, it really was.
Well, and the fact that you guys were friends, that speaks a lot. You guys did 5 albums in 5 years. That's
a lot of albums in a short
lot.
time. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, nowadays bands will do an album every 5 years instead of 5 albums in 5 years.
Yeah, that was a schedule. Yeah, and we're all working full-time jobs at the same time, right? So
Yeah. So walk me through the recording of On Rock. You had mentioned a little bit about hunting down, what was the gentleman's name who worked on Rock and Roll Machine?
oh yeah, Mark Wright.
Mark Wright. Yeah. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that.
Well, because I love Triumph, and I really liked what they did, and I knew, that Triumph had recorded in the studio called Phase One Studio, and that's where Mark Wright worked, and where he worked on that album, and it was an amazing studio because you go in there and you see all these famous bands from all over the world, like all their albums all over the wall. That was the place to go to, in Canada at least, to record albums. Like we were in the studio one time working on some stuff, and Alice Cooper was in there at the same time, and you see all these albums all over the wall from all these famous people, and so I really liked what Mark Wright was doing as an engineer because of those Triumph albums. So we actually we weren't even planning on doing any albums, and someone came to us who was a very wealthy person. They said, "We really believe that you should, record an album, and we'll pay for it." And we said, "Well, okay, let's do it." And so we rented a 24 track Studer machine and put it in the basement of this old mission in downtown Toronto called the Yonge Street Mission. And there's a small studio in there called Sound Design. And the board couldn't even hold all the tracks because it wasn't big enough. So we just started recording on this 24 Studer, and got all the tracks finished. And then that was actually engineered by a guy named Wes Storms, who owned the studio. And then it came to mix down. We couldn't even mix it down in that studio because it wasn't big enough to be able to handle all the tracks and the sound. So that's when we called up Mark Wright and said, "Hey, well, we really like you to engineer this thing, or how do we get in touch?" And he said, "Oh, well, why don't you come up to Phase One and we'll mix it there?" I go, "Oh yeah, okay, that would be amazing." And then of course Glenn Kaiser and Roger Heiss from Resurrection Band, they had become really good friends. So we'd opened for them a few times long before we did any albums. And so Glenn said, "Yeah, I'll help you guys with this thing," him and Roger. So they came up and went up to Phase One Studios with us, and we mixed the whole album down in 1 week up at Phase One with Mark Wright as the engineer, and Stu Heiss and Glenn Kaiser lending their ears and their expertise to the mix.
Yeah, before preparing for the interview, I went through your discography and listened to a bunch of stuff. And yeah, for a debut album, it's pretty solid.
It seems to be everybody's favorite still. I mean, if I was to do it again, I would change some things. I love that. I think Tony's a brilliant songwriter, and it just amazed me what he came out with. In fact, there's times I've been sitting on the boat, we've been talking to each other, we're just sitting around, because even when we get to go to rehearse for something, we spend more time talking than we actually do rehearsing. We just like being together. And I was saying to him one time, I said, I was just listening to some of these albums we recorded. I was sitting in Florida on vacation, so I was listening to Spotify and listening to a lot of the albums, and I'm listening to stuff going, this stuff is like lyrically, this thing is really amazing. I can't believe the stuff that's being said in these songs. Didn't even realize it at the time necessarily when I was singing them all, how deep they were. They were deeper than I even realized. But that was God just speaking into Tony, and even speaking into me, coming out with stuff, because I listened to it going, where did I come up with that one? Because that's certainly above me. That must have been something else, spiritual going on. Yeah, that's how that whole thing came about on Rock. And it was like we were just so blessed and fortunate to have guys like Roger Heiss and Glenn Kaiser take an interest in us. And the reason that Glenn did is he really had a burden for Canada. He really had this real call and burden for Canada. And he said he really felt that God was telling him, these are the guys that are going to represent Canada. So I feel it's like he felt obliged to obey the Lord and come and help us.
But that sounds like Glenn.
Yeah.
I've only run into Glenn once. It's actually kind of a funny story. I'll keep it short. It was at a rock festival, a Christian rock festival in Orlando, Florida in 1982 or 83. It might have been 83. and I went in to use the bathroom, and standing in the stall, and I looked next to me, and there's Glenn Kaiser. So that's my claim to fame, meeting Glenn Kaiser in
In
the
a men's washroom. That's great.
Well, it's interesting. You said you were raised in a Brethren home. My father was raised in German Baptist Brethren, and,
Okay.
and so yeah, very familiar. He would take us to some of those services, and yeah, it's all a cappella and very button up, and your Straight Ahead album, which came out after On Rock, that's your second release, correct?
Yeah.
My dad went to the Christian bookstore and bought it thinking it was Amy Grant.
Oh, there's an interesting story. I'll tell you about that, but go ahead.
And he brought it home and put it on. He about had a heart attack. I was like, no, you can't take this back. I have to have this.
Well, I'll tell you the story about the Straight Ahead thing, because Amy Grant came out with Straight Ahead, and I believe it was after us. And we were playing at a big creation festival in Pennsylvania. You probably remember it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another story about that later. But anyways, we're sitting in the green room in the back room, and Amy Grant is there, and because we were going on at similar times, strange lineup, us and Amy Grant, but Bill Finley happened to say, it's like, why did you call your name Straight Ahead? It's like, you should change it. So we laughed and joked about that back and forth. But
well, I think you were really hitting your stride with Straight Ahead. And of course, my favorite album of yours is Run from the Darkness, because of the song Run from the Darkness.
Yeah.
That sounded so Canadian,
Yeah.
That was that very Rush triumphy sound to it, which I adore, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. But yeah, Straight Ahead, I'm looking at the track listing right here, and you're hitting some pretty deep subjects, especially like Lustful Illusions, and I mean, that's a hard driving song, but the lyrics, man, they're in your face. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Lustful Illusions. I didn't even write the lyrics to it. Somebody at our church came to us and said, hey, I've got these lyrics. And I looked at it and I said, okay, let me see if I can turn this into a song. So that's how that came about.
That did it great. So on the first two albums, did you and Tony share songwriting duties, or was it mostly Tony, mostly you? Even what was it like?
Yeah, you know what? The amazing thing is, like, and I think this is probably rare for bands, but we didn't have any difficulties with this stuff at all. Tony and I typically would write songs separately, again, because we didn't have a lot of free time available with working full-time jobs. He was a school teacher, and I was working in the pest control world, and Bill Finley was a computer programmer with the city of Toronto, and Matt Del Duca was a millwright, so we had all these full-time jobs going on. So we'd write songs, and then we'd bring them to the band, and then we would sort of put them together, and then our own personality would start to come out. I've said this before, like in some of the songs, like Run from the Darkness, where you got these bass lines going on and everything else. I wish I could take credit for it, but it was really Tony that wrote those parts and said, I kind of hear you playing something like this, and so I would do that. So like even when we wrote like I'm Sorry, that was Tony's song that he wrote, and we actually used to rehearse in his classroom at his school, and so that's where we actually first put together I'm Sorry, was in that classroom. And so he wrote the whole thing, and the only thing that I even contributed to it was in the bridge part where it goes da 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 da, that little string part that happens in there. I put that in there, but we were able to easily figure out, okay, who is the writer of the song, what is writing, and what is arrangement. And so Tony wrote the lyrics and the bones of the song. The rest of us just added our own little personalities around it. So even when I wrote a song, I'd bring it to Tony and say, this is sort of the bones, here's the words, here's how it generally goes, and then would take on our personality.
Yeah, that's great. Now, when you came and played at Immortal Fest,
yeah,
I know I'm jumping way forward. We want to go back, but jump way forward. You came and played at Immortal Fest. I hadn't seen you guys live yet, so I was let's see, a freshman in '83, freshman in high school, and had just discovered Christian rock, and there were only about 5 or 6 bands, at the time doing this. It was like you, Rez, Jerusalem, I think, bands like that. And so every time anything you guys released, I was like hands on and wore the tapes out. But because my dad would let me listen to you guys, you know. Anyway, so when you guys played at Immortal Fest, when you opened up with Bethel and you hit that first note, and a guy that I work with tapped me on the shoulder, is behind me. He leans down and goes, "They still got it." And I concur. You guys sounded like it was 30 years ago. I mean, that was a great set. Tony hasn't lost anything. You haven't lost anything in your vocal register, which is, I mean, not many bands can say that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Well, thank you. We thoroughly enjoyed doing that. Yeah, it was a great time. I guess it's pretty odd for people they're watching this interview right now. They're probably looking at me going, that can't be the same guy, because there's a different thing that comes out, but right now I'm at work, so I have to dress a little differently and look different. So, but no, I think maybe, I'll tell you why. I think I'm 63 years old now, and I'm just a lot smarter how I take care of myself. So I get enough rest. I drink tons of water. I eat better than I used to when I was 20 years old. And because I'm a worship leader at church every week, my voice stays in shape, So I think all those things put together, and just, God's hand on me that's just continuing to bless me. I remember Tony and I sitting in an airplane many years ago. This is back when, probably in the 80s. And I looked at him, I said, "Do you think we'll still be doing this when we're 50? Well, I think the question is, will we be still doing this when we're 70? And I think we will." And that'll be a unique thing,
Yeah, I hope so. Okay, so let's talk about Run from the Darkness. I wanted to touch on the song Walk on the Water. And wasn't there a music video for Walk on the Water that you guys did?
Yeah, there was. So the story behind Walk on the Water is we had done a lot of TV interviews and that type of thing in Canada. And there was a show called That's Life, which is sort of features local stuff that's going on in Toronto and everything. We were on Toronto Rocks, which was like, MTV kind of thing in Toronto. And so we're starting to get noticed in these things. And so we were doing this TV interview, and the guy who was the producer of the show, what's his name now? Cresswell. Forgive me. It was Cresswell, anyways. And he was producing it, and he also produced a documentary called Forever Young on Neil Young.
Okay.
And so we just started talking and everything, and our record company was saying, "You guys probably should do a video," because videos were just starting to come about. And he said, "Listen, I'd love to produce it for you." So he offered, didn't charge us nothing, free.
That's great.
He said, "I just want to do this," And so we said, "Okay, this is." I have to stop here and say, this is what happened with Daniel Band. We just like walked around with no plan, but doors just opened and people jumped on board and said, "Hey, I can do that for you," like the Glenn Kaiser and the Glenn, and the Roger Heiss, and now this producer. And he said, "Let me take care of that. I have some favors some people owe me." And so the actor that was in that video called Walk on the Water, we filmed it in the Don Jail in Toronto, like an old real jail where they used to actually hang people in, back in the 50s, right? So this was the real deal. And so he was filming it in there. And the actor that was in it, he used to be an actor in a movie called My American Cousin. And so this guy was a fairly well-known Canadian actor too. And he did it for free too. And so we're just going, wow, that's really weird. So we did it. Yeah, that's how that came about. And the producer, Cresswell, he originally wanted to do Walls as the video. And we overruled. We said, no, we really think that Walk on the Water would be the better choice.
So, yeah, Walk on the Water, it's such a unique song. That opening, that little opening guitar, and that first the riff comes in so hard and heavy, it's incredible. And then the shouting chorus, that grabs you and slams your head into a wall. It's great.
I'll give you some background story. When we're filming this video, of course, we don't know what we're doing. And so, we're filming this video, and you have the flash pots go off in this video and everything. Well, a friend of ours that did all the pyro stuff for us, again, he was just a friend. Went and got his pyro license and just went around, managed the band. It was Neil Delandria. So he was setting up these pyros for this shot, not realizing we actually don't record audio. Like when you're recording a video, you're just, faking it to the video, to the audio. And so he loaded up these flash pots, but he had concussion powder in it. So the producer is sitting there, getting ready to go to roll the shot, and off goes these concussion things. Now you can imagine a concrete walled jail. It was like the place was going to blow up, and the producer spilled coffee all over himself, and he got a little upset. He goes, "What are you doing? There's no sound. You don't need that." So, we were, like I said, we were pretty green at all this stuff. We weren't professional, that's for sure.
No, that's great.
So when you see that flash pot go off, you'll go, that's actually what happened in the background there.
That's awesome.
And I should mention to you, in that video, you'll see a bunch of, the people that are inmates. Some of them, or most of them, were actually real inmates. There's a society called John Howard Society that really works to help getting people that have been in prison back in the street and getting back to work and jobs and everything. And they were all the extras, and they said, "Oh yeah, I remember being in here."
That's great.
So it's great to have them involved. They had a great day. Yeah.
Okay, let's skip it forward to Rise Up. A couple of it. So I remember cranking this in my car, and the song "Rock You" came on, and guys in the back seat were like, "Is this Helix?" I was like, "No, this is the other Canadian band that does "Rock You." But you start off with Bethel. I think your songwriting is more consistently strong on this record than any of the previous ones. So do you think that, or?
Yeah, what happened with On Rock, we were just doing stuff we loved and it just came natural. And to this day, that's what a lot of people's favorite stuff is. And that's why when we play live, you still hear a lot of the On Rock stuff. Straight Ahead, we ended up with a different drummer, and he was a little more creative in his approach to things than Peter. Peter was a straight on hard rock drummer. Matt Del Duca came along, and he had a little bit, he had some jazz background, and so he could reach into areas that we didn't before. So we thought, okay, let's try this. So that's why Straight Ahead came across with a little bit of a different, almost a bit of a Kansas-y feel at times, because we could expand a little bit more into that. And Tony and I were big Kansas fans too, so that was influencing some of the Straight Ahead stuff. And then when we got, that album, actually, people didn't like it that much compared to the first album. So Tony said, maybe we should just go back to what we naturally do, which is like just straight ahead rock, like the first album. And so that's where we landed with Run from the Darkness, and then Rise Up after that as well. We sort of locked in, okay, this is who we are. This is what we do. We kind of finished the experimental stage,
Yeah, I did notice a difference, not a radical departure, but Running Out of Time sounds much more commercial. Did you have was there any influence from the record labels pushing you in any direction, or were you just influenced by what you were hearing on the radio at the time?
Yeah, I would say Running Out of Time, that's a different animal altogether. Because at the time, and a lot of people know this, I've talked about it, at the time, Matt Del Duca, our drummer, he didn't, it's funny how the album was called Running Out of Time. It wasn't intentional, but the fact of the matter is we were actually running out of time. He couldn't put the time into it that he wanted to, because he was trying to sell a house, got all this stuff going on. And so when Tony and I got together and started putting the songs together for it, I actually did the whole thing with a drum machine. Like, I programmed the whole drum machine, and what we did is we got together, played the song, and I recorded it just on a cassette tape, what Matt was playing, and then I went back and then recreated it all on a drum machine. And then so that's what Tony and I played against for that album. So we actually didn't even play live together as a band with the drummer. We played against a drum machine. And then afterwards, we inserted a bunch of drum samples And then Matt came into the studio and just added real cymbals and some tom fills and that kind of thing. So it was kind of put together piecework kind of thing. Now that's why it's so meter wise bang on. I would love to go back and re-record that album with a full real drummer, because it would have a different feel altogether. But it was probably one of our better sounding albums as far as sound quality goes.
Yeah, I think the each album you can see improvements in production until that one. The reason I respond to that, saying more commercial, is I remember when this came out, a buddy of mine and I went over to his. I used to go over to my friend's house. We'd sit down and put albums on and just listen to them like music nerds do. And there's a few songs there. It was like, this sounds like George Lynch playing on guitar. And
Yeah.
is Tony, is he a big fan of George Lynch, or?
No, I am.
Okay.
And that's, yeah. I really liked Dokken, and I loved the Dokken style. So during that album, when Tony and I were writing, I was listening to a lot of Dokken stuff. And my brother was the one who introduced me to Dokken. So that's where that influence came in the writing of the songs that I had written. And not so much Tony, because he wasn't a Dokken fan, but I was. And in fact, if I can just depart from that a little bit, if you go listen to the Dreamer album, you swear you're listening to a Dokken 2.0. Because then I got all my Dokken stuff out, all the stuff that was kind of built in here that I'd been listening to all these years, just like the Rush and the Triumphs and all that kind of stuff. Now it was, in Kansas, now it was Dokken, and now that came out in the Dreamer album. But yeah, it's just a game. We just wrote the phase where we're at that time, and what we're listening to. I know Tony liked a lot of Bryan Adams, and you might catch some stuff in there. Like when I think of the song on the last, it's terrible when you try to remember your own songs, you can't remember them. But I can hear the riff in my head. But that sounds very much like Bryan Adams.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's great that
you're changing. I think that's it. Things are changing. Yeah.
Things are changing. At track 8. I'm looking at. I have the track list in front of me. I cheat. So.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So it had that kind of feel to it too. So what was interesting, because Tony and I, because there really wasn't any Christian music that we would listen to get cues from, because we were still pioneering. Like, we were sort of leading the way on this stuff. So we still were getting our influences from secular music, to see what's going on.
Well, you guys were, and did you realize at the time, because you were all working full-time jobs, and then you're doing Daniel Band, did you know that you were in such an influence on the Christian hard rock scene?
We didn't at the time. I'm just learning about it now. After all these years, people are coming up and they're going, "Oh, you have no idea. I listened, bought all your albums, lined up buying your albums, and made such a difference. You were like my youth pastor." And going, "Really? I had no idea. I had no idea." At the time, we thought, "Oh, this is fun. This is great. We're being able to, preach the gospel and be able to do it in a way that makes sense, and people are coming to hear it, and they're bringing their unsaved friends, and because they don't feel embarrassed, they don't feel like they're going to be embarrassed. People who weren't Christians would come to go, yeah, that's okay. I can listen to that. And then we'd, preach at the end, give a salvation message, and even an altar call at every concert. So it was pretty different. But no, we didn't really discover this more later. In more recent years, the kind of influence it was, didn't know. And as I'm meeting other bands, they're telling me about how they grew up listening to us, and then they went on, and did great things. So that was a humbling thing to hear. I thought that was pretty amazing. And when we were doing the thing in Ohio, it was really surprising to us there, because we're on stage just doing a short sound check. We only about 15 minutes to get a sound check, and I saw all these people with their phones up recording us. I go, what's the big deal? And then I talked to them later going, and these guys were playing in Petra and everything. Some of these guys, oh yeah, we grew up listening to you. I'm going, really? Cool.
Well, I'm glad you're finally getting that. I'm not that much younger than you. I'm 55. Okay. So I was listening to the same music you were. Rush, Triumph, Kansas. Those were my big three. I'm a huge Dream Theater fan as well. You know, but when it came time for Christian, the only thing out there was Res Band, and then along comes you guys, and it was suddenly Res was great. Res is fantastic. I'm not bad mouthing them, but that's not what I was looking for. You know, I was looking for more heavier, not so bluesy, you know, the stuff you guys were doing. And I could put you on and then put on Never Surrender, and it wasn't that far of a leap, you know, Triumph's Never Surrender. And that's the kind of stuff I was listening to. And it was great to hear Christian bands doing that. And I was living in Miami, Florida at the time. Here you guys are in Toronto. You can't get any further away in North America than Miami, Florida. And you had a lot of fans down there.
Well, we never played there, but I don't think we ever even played in Florida once. But yeah, that's amazing to hear. Like we're hearing, I'll tell you a quick story. There's a guy that goes to my church, and he's from South Africa. And I was leading worship one Sunday, and he came to visit our church, and he's sitting there and listening to me lead worship. He goes, "That guy sounds really familiar," and he kind of looks familiar. And he discovered I was from Daniel Band. He goes, when I was in South Africa, when I lived in South Africa, I'd drive a couple hours to a Christian bookstore and line up to buy your albums. And here I am sitting in church, and you're leading worship, and I go, how did this happen? You know, he moved to Toronto, and so he came over to me. And he says, "Were you in the Daniel Band?" Yeah. I've got all your albums. I bought them in South Africa. I listen to you all the time. You know?
Wow, that's further away than Miami, Florida, even.
Yeah, that's just I got to piggyback off that because that was crazy, you know. So
was he the time he was there during apartheid then?
Yeah,
so
he was.
Okay,
he was,
so your albums were getting down there during apartheid. Which Res Band did that song?
Africa. We didn't go there. Yeah. He just lived.
Yeah.
This guy lived there, and he bought the albums from there.
Yeah. Oh, that's
so
great.
We were, had the distribution all around the world, and I get letters from Australia and all over the place. It was really neat.
So you Running Out of Time was your last studio album?
Let me go back because I want to make this point. So when you think about what we originally talked about at the beginning of this thing, how that my dream was to play the basement of Bendale Bible Chapel to 100 people, and where it ended up, God dreams a lot bigger than I do.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the influence you guys had. You know, you guys have played big crowds, but the bands you guys have influenced, you know, it's a chain reaction. It just multiplies. So Run from the Darkness was Running Out of Time. You got three of your albums start with R. I just realized that. Running Out of Time was 87. That was your last release. Did you guys just consciously decide to stop recording, or just organically life went on and you guys couldn't get together to do any more albums? Or that's a long time ago, 87. Yeah,
it kind of like it began, it phased out. It really got to the point where we never really said, "Okay, guys, let's break up." We just stopped playing. Life got busy. Tony got married, had kids. I got married, had kids.
Yeah.
Bill Finley was a little further along than I was. Tony and I were, and we just found and that's why it was so interesting. The album is called Running Out of Time, because we were literally running out of time, but that's not why it was called that. It just actually was almost prophetic, So we just found that life was taking up a lot of time, and we couldn't be away like we were before. And so we all settled into doing things at our local church. Bill taught Sunday school. I started to lead worship, get into leading worship at church. Tony did the same at his church that he went to. Yeah, so it just sort of faded away, until people started calling and asking us to do reunion things again.
So when was the first time you guys got together to do a reunion show?
Wow, it's happened periodically since. So there would be periods of time where you'd have 5 years go by, and we'd go do something, and then another 5 years would go by, and someone would say, "Oh, can you come do this?" And we got the call to do live at Cornerstone when they're doing a lot of the retro bands, and they said, "We'd love to do an album, like make this into an album." So we did that, that was a great experience too. And I'm thinking that was like 20 years ago. Like it seems like yesterday, but that was 20 years ago. And then the last thing was, with the thing we did in Ohio, a friend of mine was talking to me, hey, would you guys be interested in doing this? And I said, oh, I'll call Tony, see what he's thinking. So he said, yeah, let's do it. So we got together and, for about 4 or 6 weeks and just get together on a Wednesday night and rehearse for an hour or two. And then away we went.
Now, who was playing drums? Who's playing drums now?
Yeah, right. For the reunion thing right now is Frank Catraboni. And Frank has been a longtime friend of ours. He played in other Christian bands in Toronto, and at the coffee houses, the same ones we were playing at. So we always knew him, and he was always a good friend. He was playing in other bands, and him and Tony became very good friends. And so when we decided to do some reunion stuff, Tony said, "Why don't we use Frank?" I said, "Sure, okay."
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I tell you, you blessed me, and I brought my son with me. I have 2 boys, and they alternated back and forth on 2 days. I brought one son, the worship leader. He came the first night, and then you guys played Sunday, right? Yeah.
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, you guys played the same day Petra with Greg Volz played.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in like retro heaven sitting there, Daniel Bannon here and Greg Volz. I was like, oh, this is great. But my son Andrew is really into more hardcore metalcore stuff, really, really heavy stuff. And I said, we got to see Daniel Band. He was like, well, okay, blah, blah, blah. And he sat there with his mouth open, like, these guys are fantastic. And Tony killed it that day. Yeah. Holy cow. He hasn't lost anything. He was shredding it. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought he was amazing. He didn't feel he played that well, though, strangely enough, because we did this, which was really, again, it was a shock to us that we did this meet and greet thing before we played. And there was about 24, 25 people that signed up to do this meet and greet thing. And, of course, they charged a ticket for it, right? And again, Tony and I are looking at it going, like, why would people want to do that to talk to us? Like, why doesn't make any sense, right? Because we'll go out and talk to you anyways. So it doesn't, we hang around after the concert and we talk to anybody you want to talk to. And so by the time we'd done this meet and greet it was over an hour, I think. Tony says, I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. So he said to me, he says, like, I started playing the first song. And he goes, okay, I gotta wake up. And then he just put it into gear and got through it all. But
I'm sure a little bit of adrenaline kicked in there as well, because that was a pretty big crowd Sunday afternoon.
It was a great venue. Steve, the guy that puts it on, just did an awesome job. Like the equipment, the backline equipment, and the staging and the sound and everything. Wow. It was like, this is amazing. We thoroughly enjoyed ourselves.
He does a great job. He is an idea man. We have a concert coming up. White Cross is opening for Stephen Pearcy from Rat in a concert that's coming up. So he's trying to get Christian bands to play with secular bands. And I think that's a great idea. Yeah. But I thought it was just ironic that White Cross is opening for Stephen Pearcy, because White Cross sounded so much like Rat, back in the day.
Yeah, no, great guy, and really does a great job with it. So we're supposed to be going back again next September, like end of August, September again. We're scheduled in. Yeah,
they're splitting it into 2, where they're having one in July and then one in September. So that'll be fantastic. The July one is going to be good. Deliverance is playing, Theocracy is playing, so that'll be really. I can't wait to see Deliverance. I've never seen them live either. So I got to see pretty much everybody I wanted to see growing up, but there were a few bands. You guys were one of them, because you didn't tour that much. You weren't on the road as much as a lot of the other bands. So
no, what we used to do, because we had full-time jobs, is that we would only go out and play twice a month. And we would usually catch a plane on Saturday morning and play Saturday night and fly home Sunday and go back to work on Monday. So we weren't out on the road doing, one city after another. And it was only by invitation. So we weren't even, promoting ourselves. People would just call and say, we'd love to have you come. Oh, we'll see if we can book it in. When when can we do it?
Yeah, I got a call once. It was a Friday, and some of my friends found out you guys were playing in Massachusetts, which is a far drive. And they piled in their car on a Friday afternoon and drove all through the night to go see you guys play in Massachusetts. And that was from Dayton, Ohio at the time. So right.
Wow. That is a long way. Yeah.
So I didn't go, which I wish I would have. That would have been great. But I got to see you guys at Versailles. So
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. So do you guys think you will ever record anything with the with Spotify and the streaming services? You don't have to do an entire album. You guys could lay down just one or two songs and release it. Oh, I'm sure there would be people out there that would love to hear that.
Yeah, what we did, because the company that was re-releasing all the CDs and albums that we had, they would ask us for some bonus tracks, just to make it, something additional on there. So we recorded, I think, maybe 3 or 4 songs since Daniel Band ended, sort of thing, and for those bonus tracks. And everybody's been telling us we should do this again. And so, Tony and I are going, well, maybe we should, because everybody's trying to. They kept saying it. You guys should write again. You should. Are you ever going to do it again? Are you going to do it? And I said, tell me. Well, I don't know. Maybe if enough people tell you you're sick, you should probably lie down. So, maybe we should do this. And so I actually started writing again. And so I've written a song that I want to take to Tony and show him and see. I was going to try and demo it my son, because he's doing a lot of music too. He's doing some great stuff. He's a group called Caves. He does his own stuff. And I was going to demo with him and then take it to Tony and have Tony, what I call, Rossify it, so that it brings his personality into it. And it was a song that I got the idea from one of the messages that the lead pastor here at my church was speaking on. So I thought, oh, okay. So I finished that song up just about a month ago and looking to demo it and see if it's one that. But yeah, I think we're gonna plan probably in the new year of getting together and working on some stuff together and see what comes out of it. And it's so easy to record these days.
Yeah.
I can do it right here at my church, and take care of it and get it all mixed and everything easily.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I would love that. And when you guys do, drop me an email, please. Let me know and send me some tracks. I'll write a review on it.
Oh, love to. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Hey, we're getting close to an hour here. We're at 45 minutes. Can you believe that?
Jeez. Yeah.
So let's do some question and answer. Top 5 bands of all time. What are your top 5 bands of all time?
Eagles. Dokken. Oh, probably Rush. Triumph. Kansas, and Kiss. Now, don't judge me on all that kind of stuff. I hope nobody's judging me, but those are the things that I listened to that gave me inspiration musically, and then we just put what we believe in there.
Okay, so you're from Toronto. Is it true that it is state or city code that if you're from Toronto musician, you have to like Rush and Triumph?
I guess, yeah. I guess so. Even my bass, like you saw the Rickenbacker that I used, right? My Rickenbacker that I have has been reconfigured. It's not a stock Rickenbacker. So what I did, there's a different pickup in the back end of it, which is a precision pickup. And then some rewiring on the inside has been done. And the bridge that's at the back end of it, this is all technical stuff, but it's leading somewhere. And the bridge that's on the back end of it is a total customized bridge too, which is not the Rickenbacker bridge. And the guy that customized my bass is the same guy that customized Geddy Lee's bass.
There you go.
And that's, I said, I want that sound. He goes, oh, okay. Well, I just finished this bass for him. It was his double neck Rickenbacker. He says, this is, I can do those kind of changes for you on yours too. So.
Now, did you play that bass on all of the Daniel Band stuff? Have you had that?
Not all of it. I played a precision on some of it. The first album a lot was a Rickenbacker. And then I played the precision a lot. I used to take the precision with me on the road most of the time because it was, if it got damaged, it wasn't as big a deal as the Rickenbacker. You just, you strap a new neck on it and away you go. Like a precision is it's not finicky. It's like it's a hard piece of work, it's sturdy. So when I traveled, I would usually take the Precision with me.
Yeah, the Precision is a Honda, the Rickenbacker is a Jaguar, right?
Yeah, that sort of thing. So, I just picked up the Ricky again. And the reason I picked up the Ricky is because we were sort of going more as this power trio, and it really needs that Ricky sound to fill it in.
Yeah.
So, I take the Rickenbacker and I put some distortion on it, and that really covers, the rhythm section quite a bit. So if when you're in high, you're going like, people kept saying like, how is it that just three of you make that big a sound?
So Tony's playing Fender, and he's not here to speak to it, but do you know about his gear? Has he customized that Strat?
If you saw his basement, he's got at least 20 something guitars. And he loved, often in the studio he'd be using Les Paul most of the time. But now he uses the Fender quite a bit.
A lot lighter.
Most of the time, actually.
It's a lot lighter than the Les Paul.
Yeah.
But he still has the mustache, which I really appreciated that.
That he's kept that there. And it's funny, when we're in Ohio, him and I are standing together and people are coming up to him because they recognize them, right? Oh, Tony. So we're standing there talking time, and I'm just kind of laughing and joking with the people. And Tony says, he plays in the band too, So, I'm not nearly as recognizable as Tony is.
Yeah. So you have keyboard on the albums. You did not have any keyboard on the, when you played live.
Yeah.
Do you guys, you just don't want to use tracks, or just don't want to deal with it?
No, I think that again, Tony's such an amazing guitar player. He was able to convert the keyboard lines to guitars.
Good. Yeah.
Like, for instance, if you listen to Run from the Darkness, it's actually a keyboard that plays those lines, but Tony just did it in guitar, and I kind of like it better. I really, it's harder. And so right now we're thinking about, okay, we take songs like, for instance, like Spiritual Game and some of these other songs from the first album that we really didn't play live because of not having a keyboard player. Okay, how do we convert that so that it doesn't matter?
Yeah, that's great. And I remember watching a documentary on Def Leppard, and they're talking to Phil Collin, the guitar player. And when Def Leppard did Pyromania and Hysteria, there's like 6 guitar parts going. It's not 2. There's like 6 guitar parts going. They have to rewrite the songs so they can make those sounds with only 2 guitars live. And so Tony has to do that with your guys' stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I left them off the list. Def Leppard, I was a big Def Leppard fan. I loved what they were doing, and you'll see influences in the third and fourth album of Def Leppard in what we were doing. We went to Simmons drums, and one of the reasons was it was just a lot easier to carry on the road than it was to have real live drum kits. And Matt was such a great guy, great drummer. He's yeah, okay, I'll try that. Whatever. Most drummers would have revolted, but he said, no, I'll give that a try. But you could see some of the influences, coming in from Def Leppard in there too.
Yeah, they were
really good.
Yeah.
Pyromania, like, that was incredible.
I like that better than Hysteria.
Yeah.
I recently saw them. My wife and I went to see them with Journey a couple of years ago, and they sound just like it's 1985. It's incredible.
They're incredible. I tell you, Hysteria was good too. In fact, I'm working on a song right now that actually borrows sort of an idea of, the song called Rocket Man. It has that sort of beat to it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like an East Indian beat, kind of drum thing. And I'm working on a song with that as a foundational kind of start point, kind of right now.
Yeah,
watch for that one. Maybe it'll come, and maybe it'll show up sometime.
Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, man. We're approaching an hour. I think I could talk to you for a long time.
Yeah, I feel like we just got started.
I don't want to bore the audience here. So usually it takes me a couple of weeks to get these things edited, and this is going to be new for me because I haven't edited from Google. And from what I understand, Google Meets, whoever the active speaker is, goes full screen. So like, I'm full screen now and you're not, and it's going to be weird. So I may just have to put a disclaimer at the front of that. But is there anything you would like to share with the audience?
Well, we're just Tony and I are just continually amazed at how good people are to us, and how good the Lord has been to us, and entrusted us with this platform. And we didn't talk about this in the thing, but we were really honored to get the GMA award for Lifetime Achievement Award. And I remember when we went up to get the award, the thing that I said, because there's a whole room full of musicians getting awards, and I'll say the same thing to anybody who's listening who's a musician. I said, just, please be sure that whatever you do has lasting, eternal value to it. That's all that matters. Make sure that you're touching the world with the good news of Jesus Christ, and something that will never decay or break down, having it eternal. Do that. That's what we want you to do.
Oh, that's great. And Dan, I hope it's not lost on you, again, the impact your music has had. There are folks like me, and I'm finding that there's a lot of people like me who take their music and very seriously. It's a big part of our lives growing up. Yeah. And you were right there with, like I said, I would play Triumph Never Surrender and then pop in Run from the Darkness, and it never missed a beat. It was awesome. So I hope you realize that there are a bunch of us who still listen to your stuff and love it. So,
well, thank you. All you folks like yourself and many others have been such a source of encouragement for us. And this is a real honor to be here and to be able to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for being interested and taking the time.
Oh, no problem. And this won't be our last conversation. So
I hope not. We can get into part 2, right? So
yeah, I would not mind. Like I said, I could sit and talk music with you. You have my taste. Your top bands are mine, except maybe Kiss. I was never into them.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't see behind me, but my Rush Time Machine tour poster on the wall. I have a bunch of Triumph LPs. Remember those long play albums? So those
I do remember those. Yeah, they're coming back apparently.
Yeah, it's great. Now I listen to too much. If I rebought everything on vinyl, I'd go broke. So streaming is perfect for me. I love it.
Well, just on the nostalgia side of things, quickly before we go on, we're running out of time. But this is kind of a neat story. My son Josh, who has this group called Caves, Josh McCabe, he recorded a version himself of "It's Over," the Danny Band song that I wrote, and I really, really like his version. And he recorded it at Phase One in the same studio that I recorded it in. And he's got his whole thing online about the story behind that. And that was the last thing that was recorded in Phase One studio after they shut it down.
Okay, that's cool.
So you need to go look for that and watch that, because that has great, not only I'm proud of my son, what he's doing, but it has great historic value to it.
And his band is called Caves?
Yeah. So look for Caves, Josh McCabe, and It's Over is the song. You can see a bunch of the other stuff he's recorded too. He's really sort of more of a country artist. So that's sort of his niche. But he recorded this, did it great. He really captured the feel of the song really, really nicely.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Check that out.
Cool. Yeah, awesome.
Maybe I'll send you a link to it, and I'd save you doing the search. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, great.
Okay, Dan. Well, God bless you, man, and I appreciate you taking this time. I'm looking forward to getting this up on the website, and we'll do this again. We'll cover. We got it. I'd like to get you and Tony in a room together. Sounds like you guys have a great relationship.
We do. Yeah, we really do. And I definitely, he would be open to do that. So we can arrange something with two of us sitting together in the same room. We'll do that.
Yeah, let's see how this one turns out in editing. Like I said, I haven't done this one with Google Meets yet, so we'll see how it goes.
All right.
Okay,
well,
man.
Blessing, my friend. Thank you so much.
Hey, back at you. I really appreciate this. You made my day.
Okay.
Hey, we'll talk to you later.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Okay, bye.